Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that right there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey!
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, the last of the films in our Kelly Reichardt series with her most recent film, Certain Women. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And if you like the show, if you're a regular listener, we would deeply appreciate it if you'd support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thenextreel. And you know what? Even if you don't support us, head over to Patreon, support someone else to keep this podcast thing growing and thriving. But, support us first. From all of us at The Next Reel, we really thank you for that. And with that, Andy, we've got a blot spot. Friend of the show, Ben Lott, has written in with his rebound on Meek's Cutoff.
Apparently, Kelly Reichardt likes very quiet movies with no big moments. I have to applaud Meek's Cutoff for effectively conveying the tedious struggle of traveling across the Oregon desert. Unfortunately, at times, it made watching the movie a bit of a tedious struggle as well. The film looked gorgeous and was extremely powerful at conveying tone. It just wasn't a tone that was all that enjoyable for me. Your rank 297, my rank 210.
Meek's Cutoff, a metaphor for how you're feeling as you watch it. Okay, we got to get into the movie tonight. But first, Andy, let's do trailers.
Who's going first, Pete?
You know, you can go first.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, we've got no red band, and so it's gentleman's rule, and Andy starts with an A.
And Pete starts with a P, but here we go.
Gentleman's rule is alphabetical. I guess you didn't know that.
Apparently so. Well, my trailer, Pete, is Kathryn Bigelow's new film, which I hadn't even heard that she was coming out with a new film. So when I saw the trailer pop up, I got pretty excited. It's her new film, Detroit. And it's based on a true story of a police raid in Detroit in 1967, which results in one of the largest citizen uprisings in the U.S. history. I watched the trailer, and I was like, Kathryn Bigelow has tapped into this sense of tying her films into kind of a general feel kind of going on in society, or just the political situation, everything that kind of is going on. This seemed like so timely, such a smart film to kind of push right now, and just make people, one, aware of this true story, but also just kind of use that as a mirror to kind of reflect on our own times. And I really like that Kathryn Bigelow does that with, we've talked about a number of her films already, and I think you get a little bit of that in The Hurt Locker, which isn't based on a true story, but certainly feels like it has some elements of truth as you're seeing the character in the story there. And of course, Zero Dark 30, which is based on kind of the true story. And I just find her filmmaking has become so energetic and interesting, and she's not afraid to kind of take a story places and kind of push buttons. And I think that this is a great opportunity to do some of that. Also, I got quite excited about the cast. I mean, aside from like John Krasinski, who apparently pops up, you got John Boyega, and that's very exciting to see him popping up after a little bit of some Star Wars, a little break in between the two Star Wars films. And then, of course, Anthony Mackie, who was in Hurt Locker. And just another great cast, just a cast of a lot of really interesting actors and actresses and people I'm quite excited to see. And I don't know, I just got really excited. I felt like this was a really thrilling story that I really didn't know much about. So it got me excited. What did you think, Pete?
Well, I think the tagline for the trailer ends with "It's time we knew," or "It's time people knew," something like that. I don't have it right in front of me.
It's time we knew, right?
That's pretty much how I felt about the trailer. This is going to demonstrate something or teach me something that I did not know or understand or had not been able to internalize through my, U.S. history class. Like we never got there, and so I'm really looking forward to it for that. But you mentioned the cast. That Will Poulter is one of the most interesting looking dudes. Like he is a very believable kind of authoritarian antagonist, and I have liked him for a long time. He really he's stuck out to me as a young actor in Chronicles of Narnia and Maze Runner, and I didn't see We're the Millers, but he was in that, and then The Revenant. He was
right.
He was in The Revenant, and now this as I couldn't tell if he was in uniform or if he was just some sort of a mediator or something, but he's not a very good one, and I thought he looked very intense. So I'm that whole thing drove my interpretation of the trailer. I thought it was the high energy, and I'm very excited about it.
It's going to be a really interesting film to see, just kind of get a read on what people think when it comes out and what it does in general. It's going to be opening August 4th. It looks like right now that's the only release date we have for it around the world. So it's not popping up anywhere else. August 4th, 2017 here in the USA. Hopefully it will get a much wider release though.
My trailer, Andy, is City of Tiny Lights. This is it's actually a 2016 film from director Pete Travis, writer Patrick Neate, stars Riz Ahmed, Billy Piper, James Floyd, and others. I found myself really intrigued by this film. It's a pretty straightforward kind of Private Dick tribute, sort of a noir, a modern noir. A prostitute goes into a detective on a missing persons hunt. Riz Ahmed plays the detective, and in spite of that horrific Bourne film, I really like Riz Ahmed. He did a little dalliance with Star Wars in Rogue One, and he was fine in that. I really enjoyed Rogue One, and he was a fine player in it, but nothing that really jumped out and said, wow, you want to see everything that this guy does. He was just fine. Mostly what you love Riz Ahmed for, if you love him, is his portrayal of Nasir Naz Khan in The Night Of on HBO. And he's done a couple of episodes of Girls, and which I don't really follow Girls, but I do. I think The Night Of is absolutely terrific, and he was in Nightcrawler, so he's got a lot going for him. This guy, I think he's just, his star is just getting brighter, and I really like the look of this city. It's a portrayal of London that is vibrant and colorful in its darkness, and I really hope that look lives up to the film's kind of hard-boiled promise. What'd you think?
Yeah, I agree. I loved the vibe, the look. It had a real kinetic sense to the whole trailer. I mean, it's a trailer. I know they already are kind of cut that way, but the film, it has that presence of it. And I really liked just kind of him in this role. It really kind of lent to a noirish sensibility, and him as kind of that Sam Spade sort of detective who's kind of like just kind of dealing with the dregs of society, and was just kind of stuck in the middle of it. I really enjoyed that sense of it, and Riz Ahmed, I think, is a really interesting actor. I agree. I haven't seen that show that you mentioned, but what I have seen, I generally find him quite enjoyable and memorable, even if it's not a huge part. And so that's what I like about him. And this looks like a really interesting opportunity for him. So it got me pretty excited. I just love the feel and the sense of everything here.
Well, and I didn't even mention, director Pete Travis. He's behind Vantage Point, which was the 2008 film starring Dennis Quaid, Forrest Whitaker, and Matthew Fox, if you remember that. It was a fair film. A lot of nice intrigue there. But more importantly, Andy,
oh yeah,
he is the director behind Dread from 2012, which I think we both walked out of feeling like that's a film punching above its weight.
I loved it.
There you go. I think that is very promising, and so we're putting our entertainment in Pete Travis's hands, and I think that is deserved place for it to be. City of Tiny Lights has already released. It released last week in the UK, and that's the only release date we have. So UK friends, if you have seen it, please let us know. Write in. We'd love to see to get a sense for what you think of this film, City of Tiny Lights.
Fantastic.
I can't read, Andy. The lines are all squiggly.
Hey, Flint.
What are you doing here?
Came to see my lawyer. My wife wants me out of the house.
You can't keep coming here.
Your wife works for you.
No, she's the boss, actually.
I wonder how much more there might be buried here. I was so afraid I'd get out of law school and be selling shoes. My mom works in a school cafeteria, my sister in a hospital laundry, so selling shoes is the nicest job a girl from my family's supposed to get.
Certain Women, Andy, 2016. Again, director Kelly Reichardt, writer Kelly Reichardt, based on a couple of short stories by Mel Malloy, and it tells the story of certain women, and those women are Michelle Williams, Kristen Stewart, and Laura Dern, and in my view, the very best thing going for this film, Lily Gladstone, who is just terrific as the unnamed rancher. There are some men in here, we'll get to them, but it really is the story of certain women. This is a much different film than we have seen from Kelly Reichardt in a number of ways, and it satisfies a couple of my issues with past films that we've talked about in this series, and it's still minimalist and quiet. How did it hit you?
Yeah, she very much is a minimalist filmmaker, and it was interesting to see her directing a film that has 3 stories. I think that I kind of enjoyed it, and I do kind of agree with you that this might be the best way to kind of take Kelly Reichardt's storytelling, because you really kind of get the full sense of the story, and you don't have to spend an hour and a half on it, right? So you get to kind of split that time up between 3. So each one gets its own half hour, and that's really all it needed. To that extent, I did like it. I still think it's interesting kind of watching and exploring how Kelly tells a story. And I find her a really a director who's really in touch with actors. She really knows how to have actors handle very little moments. And I really like that. I think that she's a really smart director and knows how to tap into kind of that the inner voice of the actors and just kind of watch as that kind of unfolds without them having to say anything. I really enjoy that. And I got a lot out of the film in that sense. But on the flip side, I think her minimalism can be a little tiresome and it can be a little tough to take. And it's definitely not my favorite type of filmmaking.
That's what we've come down to after these 3 movies?
That's about it, yes.
You know, I kept coming back to this point that I love that there is this stuff going on in the film, right? I love that she is able to, you know, get such mood out of these actors with this script. I love that she is so attentive to the fine details of the performance. I love the way she is able to sort of integrate the landscape of Montana in this case with the stories that she is telling. And at the same time, I don't like them very much, right? I found myself kind of stuck in the sort of slowness of it, and I just couldn't get over it. Where this film excels in a way that the other 2 that we've talked about, I think have struggled, is that it's about 3 shorter stories, and each of these 3 shorter stories, I think, are you know, allow us, you know, to have enough of a narrative shift that it fights a better fight at keeping my attention. It doesn't always do it all that well, and there are some surprises toward sort of narrative neglect, like turns in the story that you think are going to go one way and end up going the boring way, that I'm really challenged by, and I wanted to see the movie as it played out in my head was much more entertaining, and yet I love that these films exist. I love that she's such a patient filmmaker. It's just not for me. The way I've sort of wrote it in my notes is that, you know, I really didn't like this movie, but it's not you, Kelly, it's me, right? I mean, we're both on the road of life, and we're going on in different directions, clearly, because I just didn't really connect with it.
Yeah, it's challenging to connect with, and I think that's a good way of looking at it, is that there definitely is an audience for these films. And, you know, I will say, of the films that we've watched, I think this is the one that I actually enjoy the most. I enjoyed these characters a lot. I enjoyed at least 2 of the stories.
Yes.
Quite a bit. One story I found really kind of flat and kind of going nowhere.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I
wonder if it was the same story.
Yeah, I'm curious now. It's just a different kind of storytelling. It's a patient kind of storytelling, and I'm just happy that she kind of moved into this realm of doing multiple stories in a film. Even if you know, you have this whole sense of this, it's not really a genre, but you have this type of film storytelling where you have multiple stories in a film and kind of see how they all connect. This one, I didn't really get much of a sense of connection between them. I found it was almost like just 3 different stories that happen to be kind of in the same area, kind of passing by each other in the night, so to speak. But, you know, I don't know. It actually, I was curious about Maile Malloy's stories, and just kind of, I mean, I enjoyed these stories enough where I was curious about reading some of these. I thought there might be some interesting stories to read.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. And to your point, I found the final sequence, you know, the sort of 4th epilogue sequence where we see these stories, they're very loose, sort of circumstantial connections. I actually really liked that. I thought that was a really nice bit. Like it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel heavy-handed. It just served to demonstrate that this is a world in which all 3 of these things coexist. You didn't, it didn't resonate with you all that well?
Well, I mean, and maybe I missed something, but I mean, really it's Laura Dern's lawyer character. Her office just happens to be getting a visit by the rancher. That's kind of that story, the connection. And then Michelle Williams' husband is having an affair with Laura Dern.
Well, that connects all 3 stories.
No, I know. It's just
That's it. It's very subtle. It's very nuanced, right?
It's very subtle. I guess
subtle.
My problem. It's not that it's too subtle. I mean, I don't mind these sorts of connections. I think that they're interesting. I just feel like I want a little bit more of a sense of kind of is there a thematic connection between them? And I think that there is a thematic connection between just kind of the world of these women and kind of their experiences. And maybe it's just me. I like you. It's not you, Kelly. It's me. I just like, if I'm having a film that has multiple stories all kind of interconnected and all being told together, what is the reason for that? Is it going to be, is there something a little more than this? And maybe it is just the fact that there's just this kind of this subtle connection of these women who are kind of in this place in their lives where they're looked at as maybe less than because they are a woman, and maybe because they're not the person that the person on the other end is wanting, and they have to deal with that.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is interesting, I'm glad you brought that up. It's obviously a central point in the film, and one of the reason I feel like that point was interesting to me is almost the same. It's the same sort of approach that gave me such an emotional connection to Get Out. That this is a film that is demonstrating to me through these characters a side of life from a perspective that I've never seen, and. In this case, it is from the perspective of resignation and fatigue that they are living in this world, and that they have it's beyond sort of the activist or feminist kind of rage that I'm sure exists, but this is a film that demonstrates the exhaustion that comes from having to always be in this space. And I think Laura Dern's, when she's having that conversation on the phone and she says, I just wish sometimes that I was a man, because then I would say something and they would just say, okay. And I wouldn't have to, in this case, spend 10 months telling that to somebody, to a client, only to have that client go to a male lawyer and have him say the same thing and have him say, okay, well, I guess that's it then, in one meeting. And I think she says something like, it would be so relaxing or something. I can't remember how she put it, but that is the connection that I feel like this movie is attempting to make for me as a viewer, and somebody that absolutely doesn't exist in this space, right? I can't be in this space of that kind of fatigue and that kind of resignation of being just treated like that insidiously and all the time. And so on that level, this film for me really succeeded. I felt like I learned something from these certain women and their different experiences with that kind of sexism, right? We have it on the job. We have a different kind of sexism in the relationship between husband and wife that absolutely occurs. I found that part of it pretty compelling from a narrative perspective.
And also from a lesbian rancher who is, wanting, kind of in this situation where she's falling in love with somebody who just doesn't love her because she's not the same type of person, right? She's not lesbian. And
right. Exactly.
It was very interesting. And, the more we talk about it, the more I actually like that element of the film. And I think that probably is the connection between these stories, and the fact that perhaps they don't have, a big traffic accident at the end that kind of ties all three stories together, making it feel a little more forced. Maybe that does work better for this type of story. And so, I'm biting a little bit more. I think that this conversation's helping, which is good. And that's why it's always nice to talk about a movie after you've watched it, because it helps connect these pieces. And I didn't have those dots connected, but I like it more now. So
well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
What did you think about because Kelly Reichardt wrote the script off of these short stories, and the short stories were not in the same book. They were actually two in one book and one in a second book, and both links to the Amazon books are in the show notes. She put So the way these things worked, we have the first story, which is about the lawyer, Laura Dern's lawyer, and then we have the relationship story, Michelle Williams' relationship or their marriage, and then the third is young attorney Kristen Stewart driving a long way to teach an after-hours class at a community college, and so those three stories are in that order. And the third story is by all rights, I think. It's not the quietest of the stories, but certainly not the loudest. To my mind, the loudest story, the story that felt the most like a climax to me, is the first story, Laura Dern. It ends up dealing with a very frustrated client of hers who has been who has made some mistakes, and he has been maligned by his workplace, and he accepted a settlement too early, and now he wants to sue, but he can't because he accepted the settlement. He goes crazy, and well, not really crazy. He gets a gun and goes and holds a security guard hostage to attempt to make some sort of a statement. That is the most exhilarating of the three stories by comparison, and yet it is first. What is your sense of the structure of that? Because I had a real problem with that.
Not only is it first, and I guess it's worth saying, they're really not intercut stories. It's like we get one story and then the
definitely
other story,
chapters, right? Yeah,
yeah. It's funny that you say that. I think I have a few thoughts on this. One, you're exactly right. This is the sort of story that would have the hostage situation happen at the end in a different type of filmmaker's version of this, where the person Fuller goes into this place and takes a bunch of people hostage, and it happens to also be Kristen Stewart and Michelle Williams. Like, they all end up in a hostage situation, right? That would be kind of how a different type of film would tie all these stories together. And it certainly doesn't happen here. And it's funny because I think that the hostage situation is such an interesting element to introduce in that particular story. But the way that Kelly handles it, it takes all the tension out of it. I mean, it was the least tense hostage situation I'd ever watched. There was nothing thrilling about it. It was just kind of, oh, okay. And Laura Dern kind of walks in. I mean, I didn't have any sense of fear for her. I mean, they put her in a Kevlar bulletproof vest. But it was just like, okay, she goes in, she looks for the papers, and then he kind of leaves. And what it ended up doing for me was just, it ended up kind of really diminishing the whole sense of tension and climax in that particular story. And it really ended up making this particular character of Fuller, this poor man who had been just through the ringer with his situation, really made him kind of pathetically comical in that really kind of sad, touching, poignant sort of way, where he realistically seemed to think that, hey, you go out the front and pretend that I'm still holding you while I sneak out the back. And he really thinks that she's going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really sad. But that was kind of the place that he was in. And I just felt like that was the story that this was telling, is like how kind of pathetic this individual had become in this tragedy that had happened in his life, and just kind of how she dealt with that, but then how she ended up kind of connecting with him because of it. And actually later we get at the very end of the film, we get that final moment when she comes to visit him in jail, and that ended up being kind of a really touching moment as she kind of has that conversation with him. And I just felt like this was the sort of situation where, I mean, she's the lawyer, he held her hostage. She should really kind of cut the rope and not talk to him anymore. But she doesn't. And she goes and talks to him. And it just felt like there was this connection there that she couldn't let go of. And I found that really intriguing.
That, and to that point, I feel like the structure of the script, right, having that story first and then allowing the two other chapters, the Michelle Williams and the Kristen Stewart chapters, to play out, and then cut back to her, going to visit him in prison as part of the epilogue. It does allow us to experience time passing for him. Like when we come back to him, it's been long enough that it feels like he's been in jail for a while, and that's really gratifying. Again, from a narrative perspective, I think it closes the loop for us, which is structurally good. The problem that I have with it is that it is the most exciting sequence in the film, and once it's over, and to your point, it is not an exciting sequence, right? It is the most exciting sequence in the film, and I couldn't help but think that it is something that you build up to. And one of the really important reasons that this segment really should be at the end is because Laura Dern is a stinking closer, man. She's a wonderful talent, and I love her character in this. I love the way she portrays it, her sense of exhaustion. She's fantastic, and I feel like you make it through the first two, which are interesting stories in their own right. You deserve Laura Dern at the end. And so I felt like I should have earned that. And instead, it was just a kind of a slow ride through the last hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you've got to think that Kelly Reichardt, who not only did she actually write this script and direct this film, she also did her editing again, as she's done so far in everything we've talked about. You've got to think that she played around with the order a little bit in the editing, and which story is going to be the one that she wants to see up front, and that makes the most sense and everything. And it's interesting that she did take this approach to putting that up first, because it really is like you said, I mean, it would be an interesting one to have at the end. It kind of makes sense because, hey, there is this hostage situation, and it's an interesting way to end it because it kind of feels like there's a little bit of a climax. I think what she does by not putting it there is giving us this sense that these stories are really about these character moments, and they're not going to be about these bigger moments like that. And the fact that the rancher's story is the third story, and you have that, for me, it ended up being the strongest climax of all three. After she drives all the way, the 4-hour drive to go to the city and try to track down Beth, finally finding her and having that brief conversation with her out in front of her workplace, only to kind of realize that her love is not reciprocated, and hops in her car and leaves. And just that long shot of her driving away, and it just like broke my heart. It just kind of was really just beautiful and touching and painful and poignant, and did everything for me that I wanted out of the film. And so for me, I guess that's why I feel that probably Kelly ended up picking that as the climactic story, is because it felt like there was the biggest emotional climax in that story.
That's interesting. This is one of those films, and for the first time, I really felt compelled, even though I didn't like it all that much for all these reasons. I did feel compelled to see it again. I think this is going to take a couple of viewings for me to kind of internalize some of these choices. You're right. That ends up being a really powerful, sort of failed relationship. A near miss in many respects in that third chapter, and Lily is so good that I think she deserves another viewing, certainly. So,
yeah, Lily really played that scene just to perfection.
Yeah, truly. Do we have anything to add on Kelly as specifically as a director that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I think we've mostly talked about it, but it's just, the sense of minimalism paired with the being able to really pull stuff out of actors. I think it's an interesting blend. And also I find it interesting how what details she chooses to focus on. I just want to bring this up real quick because it just kind of perplexed me as I watched the film. I mean, there were some interesting moments of some great details that we had throughout the film, but the one that really stuck with me this time was boy, did we watch a lot of the rancher doing her chores.
Yeah.
I was like, what was the reason that was so repetitive? And we had so much of our time in the film focused on watching her take care of the horses. It was an interesting choice to kind of stick with that. And I couldn't quite figure out exactly why that was the element that we got of that repetitive nature of that particular story.
I totally agree, and I can make sense of it kind of cognitively, right? That there is that there's a choice in there that you show a lot of these because you really want to drive home the point of the mundanity of this world, of this certain woman, that this is, we need to be as much a part of her day to day as she is, in order to really understand the level of her grief at the end of the film when she goes back to that world after having this little taste of something different. And so I get it. I feel like on that level, and it's one choice that I'd be interested to hear if I'm kind of on the right track. But I also am not that, because I didn't, it was too much. It was too much. I get the choice, but it was too much for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I get the choice too. It definitely highlights that sense of the story. But yeah, what did you think of the first shot, last shot?
First shot, we fade in on a wide, high shot of a wintry landscape with a train. We've got a train, Andy, and it's coming from the distance into frame. We hold on this shot as a credits play, and the train eventually passes us by.
And then the last shot, again, it's a static shot, but now we're inside the stable, watching the rancher doing her various chores related to taking care of one of the horses. Life, as we said just a moment ago, continues on in its mundanity.
Yeah, I thought this was I don't know that there was, it didn't feel like there was a real sort of intentional connection between the first shot and the last shot, as we sometimes have. In this case, though, I feel like the train, coming back to this train, and what we picked up in Wendy and Lucy, which is what the train represents as a journey into town and an escape from it, that there is this sort of metaphorical escape, that all of these certain women are looking for in some way, shape, or another, and the train kind of represents that to me. The closing, when you go back to the closing, which is back to real life, we've closed the loop, it turns out the saddest piece of this film is that our hero's journey takes us back to the beginning, and it hasn't changed at all. We're no different for it. There was no escape. We were not able to get on the train, and it's sort of a sense of sadness that I think washes over you.
I agree. I think that's a great way of looking at it. I think there's always a profound sense of sadness in a particular character arc where you see your character grow and change over the course of the story, but because of something inside of them, they're not able to actually take that step. And so they see that better life now, but they're still stuck where they were. And it's painful and it's difficult. And I think all three of these women really kind of end up in that particular situation by the end of the film. You certainly see that with kind of in all their last moments. I think, oddly, the one that's weirdly has the most hope, perhaps, is Laura Dern's story, where she seems to kind of have created this connection with her client as she visits him in prison.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
But still, he's in prison. Like, she was not able to help him, and she was not able to really change her story.
No. She's still stuck in the same. Yep.
Casting by Mark Bennett and Gail Keller, and as we just mentioned, Laura Dern. I think she's just terrific.
When is she not? I mean, she's always
right?
just really great, nailing it. And I love when she plays characters in films like this, because she really seems to click with finding these unique little characters and just kind of inhabiting them. And this is a really interesting one. I mean, I guess it's not the most interesting of the characters, but she gets some interesting just scenes, and I just like her moments where she's kind of dealing with things and dealing with Fuller and dealing with the other lawyer and dealing with the hostage situation, and just the way she kind of just takes it all in by stride. It's kind of taking it as she has to. And I like that about this character.
I do too. I think she's, she wears exasperation like few actresses. I think she's she's so talented. I really adore her in anything she does. And, Kristen Stewart is growing on me even more with films like this. I think she's a really interesting actor herself. And, when you look at, what was the one she just did? It was like Personal Shopper. Yeah. I've heard such great things about that film, but I have not seen it yet. She is one of those actors that's making some incredibly interesting choices after, post mega series that I'm really curious about. Yeah,
I like that she does that. I don't always enjoy watching her. She always seems to have this sleepy presence, but I still think that
really worked in a film like Cafe Society, which I'm almost sure you didn't like.
I didn't even watch that.
You're killing me. Andy.
I've given up on Woody Allen so many years ago. I don't even watch his films anymore. But I like Kristen Stewart, though. She does have this sleepy presence, which I think works really well in some situations. Sometimes I don't quite buy into it as much. But I agree with you. I think she really picks some interesting roles and balances out some of the things like the Twilight series. And so I enjoy her in films like this, and I enjoyed her as the character of Beth. I thought she did a great job. She brought a great sense to it. There were some really interesting moments, like between her and the rancher, as the rancher turns up with a horse and offers to give her a ride down to the cafe and all that sort of stuff. It was just, I enjoyed how all of that played out. I did think it was interesting. Kristen talked about how I guess the way that she usually acts is she'll kind of learn her lines quickly, but allow herself to kind of alter it. So she kind of adds some of her own idiosyncrasies to her characters. But Kelly on this particular film said she's going to have to say her lines word for word because, as she stated in an interview, words are very important to her. I find that really interesting. I don't know why, because I don't know if that surprises me about Kelly or if it makes perfect sense for Kelly. But
yeah.
But in the world of minimalist filmmaking, I guess every word is really kind of kind of a critical little thing because there's not necessarily going to be that many words. So maybe it makes sense.
She's got a film coming up that is filming now that looks to be a fairly big budget thing. It's called Underwater. A crew of underwater researchers must scramble to safety after an earthquake devastates their subterranean laboratory. Jessica Henwick, Kristen Stewart, T.J. Miller as comic relief, Vincent Cassell. I wonder if he'll be an unnamed assassin. John Gallagher Jr., love him, just about everything. Mamadou Ati and Gunnar Wright. That's actually probably a film like Life, that we know how it's going to end, and we're probably going to see it anyway.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Yeah. So Kristen Stewart, she's got a couple of big things coming up. Michelle Williams as Gina Lewis. She plays the wife in the second chapter of the film. What'd you get?
It's interesting that you approach that character as describing her as the wife. Just, she is the wife. She's kind of driving that particular scene. Or that particular story, and she is the wife, but she's...
Is that diminutive? Is that what you think? Because I would refer to him as the husband, but I don't want to... I don't feel like I need to talk about him right now.
Yeah, no, it's just odd. It was an odd word to pick. I don't know, but I mean, she is the wife in that particular story. This is the story that for me was left me feeling pretty flat. It didn't do much for me. Her quest is to they're building this house out in the middle of nowhere, and she really wants this old sandstone that is in René Auberjonois' yard. It's this old, not like ancient, but it's this native sandstone that's just sitting out there. It was used in the old schoolhouse from, I don't know, ages ago. And it's just been sitting there, and she really wants it to be a part of her new house. And she's the owner of her business. And I thought that was an interesting moment that when her husband is talking to René Auberjonois about her and says, "Oh no," and her husband's like, "No, she's the boss. She's the one who is the boss in this particular working situation that we have." And you kind of get that. She kind of seems to have this drive and this push and this focus about wanting to get this and doing what she needs to get this brick. But at the same time, it's funny how that whole scene plays out, because the guy's like, "Okay, yeah, you can have it." And it's like, oh, okay, that was awfully simple. And I don't know. I just didn't get much out of that particular story. I mean, Michelle was fine, but it certainly struck me as the least interesting of the three stories.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was absolutely underwhelmed by this story, and like you said, Michelle Williams as the wife and James LeGros as the husband. I found the story deeply uninteresting, and so it was work to get through that until René Auberjonois shows up, and even his portrayal of this kind of health failing senior citizen living alone. I found that threesome on the couch, kind of compelling to watch how that sort of sexism plays out. The way Auberjonois, or Albert, his character Albert, kept sort of interrupting her to talk to Ryan. I thought there was a really interesting dynamic. I think Auberjonois is incredible as a performer, and it reminded me that he's out there and he's still great. And I just wish I liked this segment more.
That's exactly how I felt. And even just the connection of James LeGros' character having the affair with Laura Dern's character, I mean, I could see that there's kind of this tension between Michelle Williams and James LeGros' characters as far as husband and wife, but there's just, I don't know, there's just not a whole lot to it. And this story... It just didn't do much for me, other than seeing René Auberjonois and just realizing, gosh, I want to see him in more stuff. But I mean, that's really all this sequence did for me. And bring up the point that, man, James LeGros sports a nice big beard, and Kelly must really be into these big beards now, because we already had them in Meek's Cutoff, and now we have James with this big, great big bushy beard.
Well, and I mean, you live in a place where I imagine you don't see a lot of beards. It's not a place that celebrates the beard.
Beards are in, Pete. There are
they
even
in Arizona?
They're cooling, apparently. That's what I hear.
They're cooling. Well, I don't know about that, but I feel like Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, we're kind of we kind of corner the market and the country for incredibly well manicured large beards. And they are a thing of, dare I say, worship. I saw a guy. It was actually a client. I took photos of him the other day, and he had one of the most magnificent beards I've ever. I was nearly speechless. It was great. It smelled of almond oil. This was a man whose face smelled of almonds, and I wanted that. It's a weird feeling. Excuse me, sir. Where did you get your rich smell of almond beard oil? That's the kind of conversation that you have. So terrible. Lily Gladstone as Jamie the rancher. She's great.
Best part of this film by far. Lily Gladstone was an incredible find for this. She carries so much sense of presence, and she carried so much as far as all the subtext that you read through her character, and it really was powerful. I was moved throughout with that particular story, so definitely my favorite in the film.
Yeah, I think she was terrific. The whole sequence of her preparing the horse to take the horse, she was so proud of the horse when she wanted to surprise Beth with the ride to the diner. I just thought that was so beautiful and painful to watch. It's just a great relationship moment.
Absolutely. It's interesting that particular character was actually in the book. It was a man. It was a man named Chet in the short story. Travis B was the name of the short story. And Kelly, I'm not sure if because she wanted to title her film Certain Women that she felt, hey, this would be more interesting if I made this character a woman. But she did. And so now we have the rancher, and I guess her name is Jamie, technically, probably in the script, but certainly is never named in the film or the credits, actually. But what do you think of that particular change?
Oh, of course, it's brilliant. I mean, that is the only choice now that I've seen it. You know what I mean? I think that would have that would have really messed up the dynamic there, and I think it makes for a much richer sort of texture to that third sequence relationship. It's something that we don't see as often, and we do see a typical heterosexual courting relationship all the time, and we've seen it in Montana, and we've been there. But to see it like this, to see it as a lesbian courting relationship that ultimately ends up being unrequited, is something we don't see enough, and I really appreciated the way it was executed here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, Jared Harris. God, what you already mentioned it. Just kind of a strange thing to see him show up in this film, but I also thought he was great.
He was really good in this particular role. It wasn't something I don't know what I expect of Jared Harris, but it surprised me to see him pop up here, which is maybe it's just because it was exciting and I was excited to see him. I always enjoy seeing him in films, and I really connected with his character because I felt his sense of frustration being stuck in this situation. Whatever it was that happened, it sounded like it really just kind of messed everything up in his life and created this situation where he really feels at odds and there's no way out anymore. I found that really kind of touching, and I enjoyed seeing him struggle with this. I thought he was a great actor to carry it.
I do too, and he's so not sinister, and I'm so used to seeing him as sinister.
Right.
And it was such a treat to see him play this kind of character and remind yourself that, yes, big mainstream movies and TV shows may have cornered him and typed him, but he's a guy with a great breadth of skill, and I thought he was used very effectively.
He was the friendly boat captain in Curious Case of Benjamin Button, so he's not always the bad guy.
Okay. You got me on Benjamin Button.
There's that, yes.
Getting it made. A similar crew behind the production of this film.
That certainly seems to be the case. She seems to bring on a lot of the same people. Certainly the same team of producers seem to consistently be behind Kelly in the films that she's making, and a lot of the same people that we've seen from maybe I didn't look at the credits from the couple films that she made in between the last one we talked about, Meek's Cutoff, and this one, but certainly we see a lot of the same people from Meek's Cutoff and this one.
Christopher Blovelt Blofeld again as cinematography. Yes. He's still fits the minimalist filmmaker vibe. And Andy, I gotta say, finally, after 3 films, I'm just gonna say it out loud. The first film, the darkness was, it was kitschy, it was moody, and the second film, the darkness was okay, but I can't see what's going on. And the third film, it's just annoying. Like, light the scene, people. I can't see what is going on screen, and I deeply want to see that. And I was frustrated.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was so frustrating that it's just like, I get it. You like dark scenes, but why? There's no point in us not being able to see. You have these great tools to make it look dark, and it doesn't have to be dark, but we can still see what's going on. The hostage scene was the one that was really the most frustrating for me, because it's just like, okay, she's digging through files. I mean, I get it. Probably none of it was that important in context as far as what I needed to be getting out of the scene. But at the same time, it's like, I should be able to at least be getting a sense of what's happening without it being so muddy and dark all the time. So I get very frustrated with that. And I do find myself wishing that her camera work wasn't always so still and just, not moving. I mean, she pans as a vehicle drives by here and there and stuff like that. But still, at the same time, it's like, I don't know, try something, do something a little more interesting. I just feel like, why are we focusing on doing it this way?
I feel like I heard I heard some, I can't remember where it came from. It was just the other day. I was watching another writer who was asked the question, how do you keep trying new things and, delivering new stories and new narratives, things that we haven't heard before. And the first part of the answer is there's nothing we haven't really heard before. It's just all interpretation. But then the second one was the most difficult thing that we can do is forget what we know and what we have achieved in the past at the expense of our success in the future. And, it's a chef learning to forget a recipe so that she can do something brilliant, cook the same resultant food in a way that is new and rich and vibrant. It is a writer who is forgetting, how to put together a potboiler of a novel in order to write, something in a different genre or style, and forego the things that have brought them success in the past just to try something new. This film, I couldn't help think about that as I'm watching this film, that I don't feel like the style or tone over however many 8 years that we have watched these over the range of these 3 films has changed, right? It's still camera work, it's still the same sort of reliance on nat sound, less so in this film than the first one, but it's still there. It's still the darkness. And, you come to, at least I feel like we have in the number of series that we do, you come to expect to see some change, some evolution of filmmakers over time. And I haven't seen it. This film to me does not represent that. Am I completely out in left field here?
No, I think that makes perfect sense. So yeah, she hasn't had that sense of kind of growth in her filmmaking, other than, maybe with the characters, and you're just getting a lot more out of some of these actors. But still, as far as a filmmaker, somebody who is telling a story with film in the world of cinema, yeah, she's not doing anything new or different, other than shooting on film, apparently, because she said that snow appears flat in other formats, but then, of course, there was hardly any snow in Montana when they decided to shoot this. But still, other than that, it's like there's nothing changing. The only thing that has changed is that her darkness is not as muddy as it was back in Wendy and Lucy. But it still is just unnecessarily dark, and it's frustrating. It's almost like she's kind of created this own kind of Dogma 95 sort of sensibility about how she wants to make a movie and what a minimalist film is or something, and she keeps sticking with that, even though it's not helping.
And I think that represents a central frustration in my experience in watching the film, in spite of all the things that I really like, is I deeply want to see something new and different. And I'm not talking about the story here. I'm talking about the way the film presents itself on screen. And because she has taken such ownership of so many different pieces of the film as a filmmaker beyond director, I feel like she also owns the responsibility to evolve those roles, right? And to do something new as an editor, as just as she does as a writer. And I think her writing has changed. And your point about the character work, I think her taking a greater degree of ownership in writing and adapting these three stories, I think you see, get an even better sense of who she is. I asked the question if she was an activist filmmaker when we talked about Wendy and Lucy, and I think this film makes an even starker point that she does have a position that we need to learn as a result of watching this film. She's holding up that mirror for us to observe something in these three stories that is important to her, and I think she pens these stories well. But goodness, when we're talking about production, there are some things that are downright fatiguing to watch.
Yeah, that in particular. I mean, the production design, hair, makeup, costumes, all that stuff, I think works effectively. It's not as interesting, I suppose you could say, as Meek's Cutoff, only because that's kind of an interesting period sort of stuff. I think it all works fine. But yeah, I think that the camera work is really kind of the area where I feel like, and just the sense of what she can do with it, and in the sense of how she can tell a cinematic story. I'd like to see more of that. I do think that she's somebody who uses locations effectively. And I like the locations that she chooses in Montana. I found that it was nice, and kind of the bleak landscape and just kind of the different areas that she shot in were interesting. It didn't scream out like there was another sense of subtext as far as the different locations she chose, but I still think that she found effective locations to kind of convey some of the loneliness of these particular characters.
Yeah, she's been compared to, great Western poets or, some of my favorite Western writers, right? Zane Grey or Larry McMurtry, right? I mean, these are people who know how to portray the landscape of the West, and I think she does a great job of appreciating the landscape in film. I like it, and in that regard, that sort of pairs with this the choices around cinematography, around really appreciating the scape of the land in the camera, and I think there are pieces of that she does really, really well. So Montana as part of a character, I think it works, particularly in that third chapter where the ranch hand's identity is so inextricably connected to the land. That was really effective for me.
Yeah, and actually that ties into another element of just the sound, and I thought that tied into the location, how as the rancher is kind of making her long 4-hour journey to the town or the city, I suppose you could call it, where Beth is from, you get this interesting sense of place conveyed through the radio signal that she's actually picking up in her little truck. And how for the first couple times when we're cutting, because it kind of cut as she's driving from place to place, you get just kind of static and then little bits of radio coming in. But by the time you get to the town, it's like, full on radio signals. I liked that. I thought that was a great way to kind of convey that.
I did too. I thought it was really great. In terms of music, we've got Jeff Grace, and it's kind of a minimalist score. You weren't so much of a fan?
I mean, I like it. It's just maybe I just like having a little bit more score. I just feel like there's so little of it here. And there were some times where I felt like, I could have used some score, perhaps again, going to her minimalist style. She just isn't somebody who wants to have the score kind of in certain places, kind of telling you what to feel. Maybe I like that. I just like having some of that in there. But I do like what's in there. I like Jeff Grace as a composer. He's done some interesting films. And I do like the music here. It wasn't anything, I guess there just wasn't enough of it for me, maybe my issue.
It feels much more like just sort of practiced riff work, like there's a great sort of meditative guitar riff and it's played again and again in a meditative way. And that appeals to me as somebody who's not very talented at the guitar. And so it's the kind of thing that I sit down on the couch and just play for a long time because it's all I can do. And so when I hear it in movies, I think, hey, I can kind of do that. And maybe that's why I connect with it musically. How did it do in awards season?
This was one of those films that did get, it had 13 wins, 44 nominations across primarily a lot of just individual film festivals where it played at. But some of the bigger one is the Independent Spirit Awards, where it was nominated for Best Director. Kelly lost to Barry Jenkins for Moonlight, which I think we probably both agree is the appropriate choice in that particular case. And Lily Gladstone was nominated for Best Supporting Female, which I think is fantastic that she got the recognition out of this film. Certainly for a film that is more of an ensemble, it was great seeing somebody get singled out, and of them, Lily as the person who did. But she did lose to Molly Shannon in the film Other People, so didn't win any Independent Spirit Awards. Also out there's the Women Film Critics Circle Awards, and it ended up getting a good number of nominations. Didn't win anything. What was interesting for me was the categories that they actually have at the Women Film Critics Circle Awards. They have the Courage in Acting Award, which they nominated Lily Gladstone for. She lost to Rebecca Hall for Christine, which I still haven't seen that, but I am really curious about that particular film. The Courage in Filmmaking Award, Kelly Reichardt was nominated for that, but that went to Ava DuVernay for 13th, her documentary. The Invisible Woman Award, Lily Gladstone was nominated for that, but it went to the Women of Hidden Figures. And then in the other awards, they have Best Movie About Women, that went to Hidden Figures. Best Movie by a Woman, Kelly Reichardt was nominated, but it went again to Ava for 13th. The Best Woman Storyteller, also went to Ava DuVernay, and the Best Female Images in a Movie, but that went to Hidden Figures. So a lot of really interesting categories. Didn't win anything, but it kind of excited me to learn that this organization is out there and that they have these awards.
You know, I think this demonstrates how deeply conflicted I am about this movie, that I didn't connect with it or like it very much, but I am still so satisfied that it is in such great company in award season. Do you know what I mean?
I found it a really compelling film. I think it's probably, for me, the one that I like the most out of Kelly's films. It's a really interesting story, a lot of stuff going on here, and I think her strength is telling these little stories, and I think it worked in a way where she was able to do 3 in 1.
Yeah. And this was a point I made about the first, Wendy and Lucy. I think Wendy and Lucy would have been a wonderful film as a part of a trio of chapters like this one. As a standalone film, it was, about, I don't know, 60 minutes over long for me. This film does exactly what I wanted, right? It gives me a whole movie, but it gives me 3 pieces that as movies, in and of themselves would have been way too long, but each one of them is made better by the other 2. So I found that, much more satisfying, and I'm with you. Of the 3, this is definitely my favorite. How did it do in the box office?
Well, somehow Kelly managed to get another cool $2 million to get this film made, despite some financial struggles with her past several films. Apparently, she's got a group of supporters who really just want to see her making more movies. The film was released on only 5 screens October 14th, 2016, opposite The Accountant, Kevin Hart, What Now, and the family film Max Still. It did end up making it up to 138 screens, but still never made its money back. It earned $1,068,054 domestically, which actually is Reichardt's first film to break $1 million at the domestic box office. So I guess to that end, there is growth in her career, and just over 67,000 internationally, for a total of about 1.1 million. It means the film had an adjusted loss per finished minute of $8,000.
Where does that, of the 3 films, do you have the 3 per finished minute? Because they all lost, right, if I recall.
No. Wendy and Lucy actually made money. Wendy and Lucy brought some money in because that one was made for such a little amount of money. And I find it interesting that she's had such bigger budgets these next couple times. Because, if you look at the film, Certain Women has been the biggest box office loss, losing more than 8,000 per finished minute. There was a big loss with that one. I would have thought it was Meek's Cutoff, but that only lost about 1.3 or 1,300 per finished minute. But it also had a budget of $2 million. So somehow that one did end up making more money at the box office than Certain Women. But if you look at Wendy and Lucy, that film ended, it had, that, again, it boils down to the budget. It had a budget of $300,000.
Yeah.
It was really, really small budget. And that
If you get any distribution on that film, you're going to make money.
Yeah, exactly. If I were an investor looking at the types of films that Kelly makes, I would say, okay, I'll give you $300,000 to make that movie because I can get a return on my investment with that. I wouldn't give her $2 million because you're not going to get that investment back. Wendy and Lucy made more than $15,000 back per finished minute, again, because of its budget. I mean, if you look at the grosses, yes. Okay, let's see. Wendy and Lucy, the total adjusted gross was about $1.5 million. Meek's Cutoff made just a hair over $2 million, like just barely over $2 million. And Certain Women, I mean, yeah, it's at, what did I say? It's at 1.1. So it's, when you're in the circle of these kind of low budget character stories, it just doesn't seem like something you want to put a lot of money into.
You know, this gets back to filmmakers, and I like Danny Boyle, for example, who I know is not the only filmmaker to say this, but he certainly speaks about it quite eloquently when he talks about how he suffers when he is given too much money, and that he says that he is at his best when he's making movie at a more modest budget, and when he talks about films like, gosh, what was it that he got more money than he had in a long time. He was just listening to this interview. I can't remember.
Was it Life Less Ordinary?
Maybe because that was no, it was The Beach. It was The Beach.
Oh yeah,
which was just crazy for him coming off of Train Spotting and A Life Less Ordinary, and here we are doing The Beach for a lot of money. And he said, as a director, it was a disaster. It was too much money to make a great film. And so that's one of those lessons that even though he's in a very different sort of budgetary kind of echelon than Kelly Reichardt at this point, the same comparison may hold, right? I don't know from an investor's perspective what you make of that, but it certainly feels like too much money spent on choices that maybe didn't need to be made.
Well, and I guess the question is, what are they spending the money on? I mean, you're obviously getting more caliber actors performing in the film. It's a better looking film. I mean, I would say that both of the $2 million films looked a lot better than the $300,000 film. But there's not a sense of growth in the storytelling when you're increasing the budget so much. So I think that for me would be the sticking point, is that I want to see a little bit more of the growth because they look essentially like the exact same type of film.
I think it's time, Andy, for us to rank it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel or just swipe over to your show notes in your podcast player there and you'll see the word Flickchart. If you tap it, it will jump you straight over to Certain Women on flickchart.com. You can add it to your list of films, and let's see how it stacks up in our ranking.
All right, first up, we have Certain Women or The Road Warrior.
Well, I think it's The Road Warrior.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely more of a film that I think appeals to both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Certain Women or Atlantic City. A little bit of Louis Malle. I'm kind of a fan of Atlantic City, so
I am too. One. Yeah, no, it's I'm Atlantic City.
Certain Women or Gone with the Wind. I have issues with Gone with the Wind, but I'm still going to pick it because there is a lot of sense of filmmaking going on in that film.
I'll give it to you, but I'm bitter.
I'm bitter about it. Certain Women or Marty.
Oh, geez, Certain Women.
Certain Women. Certain Women, going back to that, Marty is an interesting film. I kind of like.
No, it's not.
Still?
No, it's not.
Listen to me. I kind of like Marty. It's an interesting one because I think that it could also benefit from a truncated story.
A lot.
Well, interesting.
Yes, I agree with you, Andy. On just that, we are in violent agreement.
All right, next up, Certain Women or The Crazies.
I'm The Crazies.
I'm Certain Women.
Really?
Yeah.
Like hard?
Yep.
I'm not that hard on The Crazies, so you can.
Okay. All right. Certain Women or your favorite film, Pete. Yee, a 1 and a 2.
Certain Women, please, Andy. Certain Women, and yes.
We're going to have to rock, paper, scissors this one.
Jeez. All right, here we go.
All right. And 1,
1,
2, 3. Rock.
scissors,
rock,
paper, paper,
paper, scissors.
paper. There you go.
There you go.
That's the new way we play this game.
I like it.
Okay.
That's going to really help. Okay, Yee takes that one. Whew.
Jeez.
Certain women or Key Largo.
Key Largo.
Key Largo, please.
Mm-hmm.
Certain women or We're No Angels.
That was a nice movie.
I'm going to pick We're No Angels.
Yes, you are.
Certain women or Christmas in Connecticut. Christmas in Connecticut.
Also a nice movie.
Yes, it is.
These were our very early holiday movies.
Ah, yes, indeed. Well, that does it, Pete. Puts it at 271 out of 298 on our chart. That's just a few spots above Wendy and Lucy. And, of course, we have Meek's Cutoff way down at the bottom.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the ranking of the three, that feels about right to me. In terms of the ranking on our chart, I think that demonstrates that we are not probably in the core audience, although there is a lot to appreciate on this film in particular.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot to appreciate. I actually think that this is one that I would watch again. I really enjoyed the characters, particularly that third story. I almost feel like I would just skip over the Michelle Williams, James LaGrosse story and just go from the first story to the last story.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed kind of what Kelly was doing here. And I feel like, if anything, I feel like there has been a sense of kind of that growth in honing in a little bit on those character moments. And I really think that it benefited her telling a story that had 3 parts to it.
Oh, yes. Huge. What's this do for your Letterboxd ranking?
I really was going back and forth on my Letterboxd ranking. Was it a 3-star or was it a 3.5 star? I ended up settling on 3.5 star. I think kind of mainly after this conversation, I feel like there's more to it than I initially got out of it, and I definitely appreciate that. And it's a film that I think I would revisit again. So I gave it 3.5 stars.
I'll give it 3.5 stars with you, and I think a large part of that is because I think there is a lot going on that I feel like I'm interested in others' opinions on it. I think she's telling a really interesting story around particularly latent sexism, or kind of that stuff that I don't see, and I'm interested in watching this with other people who are patient film students.
Here's a question for you, Pete, something that we never have discussed at all. But for those of you who use Letterboxd, you are aware that Letterboxd not only lets you do a star ranking, but it also lets you do a like. Do you like it or not like it, with a little heart? Which I think is really interesting, because you can like a 2-star film, but you cannot like a 5-star film. And I think that's
the guilty pleasure critical consensus tool. I like that a lot. Yeah.
So
I
feel like we should. I heart that too. I feel like we should start using that.
Okay.
It's going to be tricky, because obviously we're going to have to, like, how are we going to split that if the two of us disagree?
Alphabetically.
Alphabetical. Gentleman's agreement. So, but let's do it. I would say that it's 3.5, and I liked it.
I mean, I would have said 3.5 and leave it blank, but I since I don't know how to split it, and it was your idea, I will let you do this week without fighting.
I feel like if I like it, it's a film that I'm inclined to go back and watch again. I feel like there's something there, and I'd be willing to look at, because I found myself getting something out of it. So to that end, I feel like you would say you liked it.
Awesome. Yeah. No? Okay. I like it. Then I agree with you. I agree with your interpretation of me.
That's all that matters, Pete. That's all that matters.
Excellent. All right, Andy. Well, this was a treat, and now we have what I imagine is going to be a hairpin turn of a tonal shift. Where do we go from here for our next series?
Yes, we're going to be kicking off a new series of 3 films directed by Chilean filmmaker Pablo Larraín that have come to be called, I guess it's his unintentional trilogy, not something he actually planned, but they've kind of all ended up taking place at the beginning, middle, and end of Pinochet's dictatorship in Chile. The 3 films we'll be looking at are Tony Manero, Postmortem, and No.
I am very much looking forward to these 3 films, particularly watching them together.
Yeah, and particularly because I haven't seen any of them. So it's certainly some films I've heard about and have piqued my curiosity, so now I have the chance. So very much looking forward to it.
Excellent. And did you want to mention our note on Tony Manero in particular?
You know, I don't know if it's that critical, but certainly the character Tony Manero in the film is really kind of a huge fan of Saturday Night Fever and kind of has patterned himself after the character Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever. So I think that you and I have both agreed that we're going to watch Saturday Night Fever before we jump into Tony Manero. We're not saying it's required, but it certainly could be something that could help inform that particular film for you if you choose to watch it and follow along with us.
And I think that that's going to be exhausting. And so I better get my rest, Andy. I've got to go to bed.
Oh, I hear you, man. I got a long drive ahead of me, 4 hours. But, first I'm going to go hit the diner and eat a burger. Oh, hope it doesn't put me to sleep.
Amazon was not able to giveth, Andy.
Amazon didn't. It kind of hurt.
It hurt. There is no, we found no entry for certain women on Amazon, and therefore none of the internet was able to comment there. However, the internet did come out to Rotten Tomatoes. So this week, Rotten Tomatoes hath giveth, and we've got a couple of reviews from audience reviews over there. And are we going to go up or down? Our ranking.
We should go up, don't you think?
Okay, so why don't you start as a...
Okay, I've got Nunya B's review, which is a half star. Absolutely terrible. The only redeeming qualities about this film are the wonderful cast, who must have struggled with such a piece of crap, pointless storyline, which they acted on beautifully, and the gorgeous scenery, which was captured so well that I actually felt the cold Montana air while watching it. Those are the only reasons I gave this filth a half star. Otherwise, it would be 0 or negative stars. This film is completely boring and pointless from start to finish, to the point I was angry at the person who made it. I signed up for this account on Rotten Tomatoes just to write this review and save everyone 2 hours of their life and skip this one. I'm the guy who loves weird movies and boring dramas that nobody else likes, and even I hated this one. That's saying a lot.
And we should say that this is, I don't know how to sort on Rotten Tomatoes. We're clearly not regular Rotten Tomatoes commenters or reviewers, but there are a lot of really positive and touching reviews on this film.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some that are sub 1 star at a half star. Mine is a 1 star from Tom, and he says, it's a real snoozer with no hint of a plot. Great for dozing on transatlantic flights. So certain women or Dramamine. I did pick one critic review from Camilla Long at the Sunday Times who summarizes it: all fine detail and no fun. And that really resonated with me after watching this movie, that it is a real celebration of fine detail, and the points that I'm missing in the narrative, whether they're happy points or dramatic points or sad points, there's nothing fun that comes out of it as a viewer. And I thought that was a particularly astute comment.
Very much so. Very much. I agree.
All right. Thanks, Rotten Tomatoes.
It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know. You're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Betty Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Betty Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the entire The Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.